The cabin. My wife and I decided to take a road trip with our little kid William, thinking that it would be a good experience for the little guy. So, we searched for a tourist place that we could visit by car on Google Maps and headed off. It was a long drive. We had to make a night stop in the middle of our journey and continued our journey the day after. We arrived at our destination. The place was beautiful and our kid really loved it, and of course, so did we. We spent the rest of the day sightseeing. It was now getting late, so I decided to go look for a decent hotel to spend the night at. I had heard that it's not hard to find a hotel there, so I didn't bother searching as soon as we had reached there. Strangely enough, there were no hotels in that area at all, and what I had read on Google was just false news. They were located at almost 2 hours drive away. Not having another choice, we decided to drive back and look for a hotel, even though I avoid driving at night. The place where we stayed was just a few hours away from our destination, so we decided to drive back and stay there. The sun had quickly set beyond the horizon, and darkness slowly rolled in, spreading its wings. We drove about an hour, and there were still no signs of hotels, or any other building for that matter. Thick forest surrounded us as we drove on the road, ripping its way through the forest and the darkness. It had started to rain now. The only light that could be seen was from the headlights. The sound of the car's engine revving echoed around along with the soft sound of the rain. That was when somebody suddenly jumped in front of the car. All I saw was two glowing eyes before I turned the car away in the hopes of saving it. But instead, the car went to the side and crashed into a tree. My head was now spinning as my body ached. I looked over to my wife. The airbags had saved us from getting hurt. William was in the back seat, nicely buckled up, so he was okay too. I sighed in relief before taking out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The rain only got heavier, and it began coming inside the car through the broken windshield. This day can't get any worse, I thought to myself. I explained to my wife that I was going to look around and see if I could get any help. She nodded as she pulled William closer to herself. I took out the flashlight and headed out. I walked around the road hoping that someone would pass by and help us. About 20 minutes passed and there was no signs of any passerby. Just when I was losing my hope, I saw a light shining in the forest not far from where I was. Not having much choice, I started walking towards the light. It took me about 7 minutes to reach the source of the light. It was a private cabin. I could tell by just looking at the cabin. It was newly made and was in a lush condition. I walked around expecting to find a reception office or other cabins but found none. As odd as it was, only this building stood in the middle of the forest. There wasn't a soul to be seen. I walked back to where I left my family and brought them to the cabin. It was better to stand in the shade of the cabin rather than sitting, getting soaked in the car. I looked around the cabin, looking through the windows. It was dark inside. I came to the front door and knocked on it. We repeated the process and tried calling out if someone was sleeping inside, but there was no response. We waited for a bit until I randomly tried the front door. To my surprise, it opened. The door was unlocked. I knocked before peeking inside. It seemed to be unoccupied. I turned on all the lights and called out again, asking if anyone was there. Just like before, I received no response. I signaled my wife to come inside as I looked around the cabin. It was beautifully furnished. Everything was new and unused. I made my way upstairs. The rooms were on the second floor. There were 3 rooms in total, all fully furnished. I almost felt bad for barging in like this. We tried to keep the space clean and left our muddy shoes by the front door. We got changed and headed to bed, as it was an exhausting day. It took me a while to fall asleep, although the bed was super comfortable. I had no idea what time it was when I heard William waking us up.
"Daddy? Mommy? I'm scared. There's someone in my room,"
he whispered in a frightened voice. There was no way anyone was in here. I checked the whole cabin. Thinking that he was just scared since it was a new place, we decided to let him sleep with us. Only minutes later, I began hearing this abnormally loud sound of breathing. I sat up in confusion. I looked over to William and my wife, who were sleeping peacefully. Blood drained out of my face as I realized the sound was coming from underneath the bed. I quickly got up and turned on the lights, keeping my eyes on the bed. As soon as I turned on the lights, the sound stopped. I walked up to the bed and looked under it to see nothing.
Baby, what's up?
My wife asked in a drowsy voice. Nothing, honey. Just thought I heard something, I replied. I turned off the lights and climbed on the bed. It didn't take me long to fall asleep after that. I don't know how much time passed after that when my wife woke me. I looked towards her and she was pale as a ghost.
There's someone standing in the doorway,
she whispered, her voice shaking with fear. I looked towards the door, and for a moment, it felt as if my heart had stopped beating, as I saw a tall, shadowy figure standing in the doorway, staring at us with the same yellowish eyes that were dimly glowing in the dark. It was the same thing that caused our accident. Reflexively, my hand reached for the flashlight that I kept on the side table, quickly turning it on. I flashed it at the figure, and it disappeared before the light even reached it. Followed by a loud sound of screaming, it was as if it was coming from every direction. Without much thought, I picked up William and we ran out of the cabin. We ran into the forest towards the road. We didn't stop running until we put up some distance. I didn't want to be anywhere near that cabin, nor did I want to know what it was that we saw. By some luck, a pickup truck came our way. I talked to the man and he agreed to give us a ride. A few days later, I went back along with a mechanic to get our car. When I went back, just out of curiosity, I walked towards where the cabin was, and to my surprise, there was no sign of it. It was like it never existed. Even to this day, we have no way of explaining what took place that day.